Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for coming. I am, again, Saskia van Kampen. I used to teach at OCAD University in Toronto, Canada, so I am familiar with the Canada landscape, the academic landscape in Canada. And I now teach at San Francisco State University, and so I have a bit of a broader understanding of portfolio requirements for both universities and professional practice. I also was a professional graphic designer for 15 years. So I have also had experience getting jobs within the field back when we actually had to have physical portfolios where we had to lug them around. Now it's all digital. And so I've seen it all. I've also sat on a lot of portfolio review boards, as Vicki mentioned. So I do have experience on both sides of the portfolio review. So I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. So your portfolio is your brand, and that's what we have to always remember, is that the portfolio is representative of who you are as a designer. And a lot of people forget about that. They build their portfolio thinking it's all about the work, but the portfolio itself, the shell that houses the work, must be designed as well. So I also want to call your attention to my email address. Please feel free to reach out if you have a question at the end that you forgot to ask. Anytime, I'm here to answer your questions. So your portfolio, and I want to also stress the fact that this talk can be both for a portfolio interview for a school to get entrance into a school, or to get you a job, right? So it's multi-purpose. You can apply what I'm saying to both requirements. Now, a lot of people think you have to have your own URL, and that is ideal. It's ideal if you're a working professional, but it's not necessary, okay? So if you're a student applying to get into a university or a college, faculty know that you don't have those kinds of skills yet. That's why you're applying to the school. So it's not necessary. So using a format like Coroflot, Format, Behance, these are all perfectly acceptable platforms. But if you're applying for school, a lot of schools have their own platforms that they want you to upload it to. So if there is a platform, you almost have to design the pieces that you're putting up onto that platform as if they were pages in a website. Okay, so this is how you have to kind of I'll be talking about a website portfolio, but you can translate that into uploading individual PDFs of your work. Okay, so a portfolio is telling a narrative. It's telling the narrative of who you are as a designer. It's also telling the narrative of each project. So your portfolio talks on your behalf. So a lot about the portfolio is going to deal with writing, the dreaded writing. It also needs to demonstrate the breadth of you as a creative individual, right? So what are you capable of? Employers and faculty are going to look for whether or not you're going to be a good fit, what kind of work you do, what kind of work are you interested in? So for example, if you're interested in interior design and the school doesn't offer interior design, that's not going to be a good fit. What are your capabilities? What are your values? Is there potential? And is there passion? So those are some of the things that folks are going to be looking for. So the content of your portfolio, depending on where you are applying, there will be specific requirements for the portfolio. Usually, if you're applying to a school or a job, they want a bio or a profile. So on something like Behance, there is actually a profile or bio area. For a school, they may ask you for a specific statement about yourself. Each project that you upload should have a brief written statement of intent. Folks want to know what they're looking at, right? If it's just an image, what is it, right? So you need to give a little bit of context. You want to show the visuals of the project and also a sketchbook of your process work. And these are the images that you see above here. I personally find sketchbooks to be really, really fascinating. They sort of demonstrate observation skills, right? Not just like, hey, this is my thought process for a project. It's where you do your doodling. It's where you do your thinking. It's where you're doing oh, you see something, so you sit there and you sketch it, or you thought of something, so you quickly jot it down, or you're trying to work out a problem, so you're thinking it through and doing iterations. This is why sketchbooks to me are extremely important. So providing pages from your sketchbook or process work to accompany some of the main works in the portfolio, even if they don't ask for it, show it. So here we go again about your bio or your profile. You may be given a word count for this. Whether or not, if it's on a Behance portfolio page, it should be short. Nobody wants to sit there and read an essay. It should be brief and succinct and contain a lot of information. So your first sentence is briefly introduce yourself. What's your name and who are you? Your following sentences discuss your personal and professional values, right? So what do you value in both your life, and how does that affect design? How does that support your values in the design work that you do? And then support these points with the details, including skills and attributes that you offer. What factors make you good at what you do, and talk about who and what inspires you. One of the things, if folks don't say who inspires them, I usually ask, because if you can name off a few designers, a few illustrators, that shows me that you've done a little research into the industry that you've chosen as your career. And it means that you know kind of what it is. A lot of times when I ask folks, hey, what is graphic design? What do you want to do in graphic design? They can't answer that question because they don't really understand what design is. And that too is okay. But if you're able to answer that question, it just shows me you've done a little bit more digging. And then you want to end with what kind of design you're passionate about and why you should be admitted or hired. The key thing to writing a bio is avoiding repetition of I statements. I read a lot of, hi, my name is so-and-so, I am a student at such and such school, I like to do this, I value this, I am capable of this. It's extremely boring to read. So you want to come up with different sentence structure where the I is buried in the sentence, right? So going for long walks, I find my inspiration through looking at nature, right? So that's how you move the I into a different area of the sentence so that it's not so repetitive. And then we have the statement of intent, right? So every project should be accompanied by a statement of intent, and this gives your work context. It explains to the viewer what they are looking at. So one of the things you want to say, was it an assignment? Was it personal work, or was it client driven, right? And this is key to me as a portfolio reviewer for academic review. I want to know that you've done work outside of assignments. Actually, if I was an employer, I'd also be looking for this. It shows me that you've got passion outside the classroom, right? So not only are you doing assignments that you have to do, you're also enjoying design and art and image making on your own. And if you've done any sort of freelance work, maybe not, a lot of you haven't, and that's also fine. But if you have, include that as well. What did you want to achieve or communicate? Right? So this was an assignment for school. You don't say the assignment asked me to do this. You want to say what you got out of the assignment, right? So this assignment asked me to look at perspective in such and such a setting. And what I achieved and what I communicated was I really wanted to show like a extreme view so that you really got a sense of depth, right? What were the challenges and how did you address them? So maybe there was something that you really struggled with, or there was a concept that you had to sort of work through. Talk about those things and how the decisions that you made in order to make that work. Don't try to really try to avoid simply describing the work. The color blue was used. I used a serif font. The flower motif is a pattern. We can see all that. Why is it a flower motif? Why did you choose that color? Why did you choose the sans serif font? Those are the sort of things the statement of intent should include. So here we have an example, and I'm using this is all my work. This is an example of a piece that I've done for it was for a feminist art exhibit. And so this is my statement of intent that accompanies my work. And this is only 105 words. So this was a personal project in which collage was explored using thread instead of glue to hold the pieces together. Much like the saying, holding on by a thread, the connections between the pieces are fragile. The pieces with text are copies of text found in vintage advertisements for women's beauty. The challenge was to hold the pieces together in place while sewing them, and how to leave empty spaces, yet still hold a sense of shape. The end result shows how these notions of beauty are being eroded by women who no longer succumb to social pressures and the manipulation of advertisements. Notice how I didn't say I used purple and pink. I didn't describe it. I talked about why it looks the way it does. The key to writing, and I know I'm dwelling a lot on writing here, and this is it's key to a portfolio. Writing is like the creative process. It's a process. It requires reworking and refinement. Do not write your statement of intent once and think it's fine. Write it once, walk away, come back, read it out loud. Because if you read it out loud, you start to hear where it's falling apart, where there's holes, or where it starts to get really repetitive. As I was reading the one above, I noticed the word text was said quite a few times. So I should probably go back and rewrite that, right? And again, it's always evolving. You always have to go back and recheck and revise. Use Microsoft Word to write, as this software will catch spelling and grammar errors. So use some kind of software that's going to help you with your grammar, because we all need help with that. Have someone read it who is impartial. And this is key. Don't ask your mom to do it. Don't ask your best friend to do it. Ask a teacher, a mentor, a tutor, because they're going to be more critical. They're going to be more honest. Like I said before, avoid repetitive sentence structures like I am this, I like that, I want to. Avoid sentences that are vague and say very little, right? A lot of students will write very flowery sentences and they sound really good, but when you actually read it, they say nothing, okay? And you've got to watch for that. And this links to the next statement, avoid language that you would not normally use. A lot of students go to the thesaurus and try to build make them sound more intelligent by using massive words. It just sounds silly. It doesn't sound natural. It doesn't sound like you are being authentic. Really, just if you would speak it, that's the way you should write it. Don't try to be something that you're not. Also, if you look at this one that I wrote it as if I was not part of the process. This was a personal project. The challenge was, the end result shows. Notice how I don't refer to myself at all. So you can actually avoid the repetition of I statements by not using I at all. It's hard to do in writing your bio, but it actually is very, very easy to do when you're writing about your work. Okay, now on to the visuals. Your portfolio is your brand. I'm going to say that over and over and over again. You not only want to demonstrate your work, but you want to demonstrate that the portfolio is an umbrella of you. Okay, so demonstrate what you wrote in your bio and how you present your work. The look and the style of the presentation should be consistent. It should be your brand. So whatever color you use, the font you use, and the structure you use for your bio, for your statement of intent, and for the overarching look and feel of your website should be your brand. It should be consistent. And then the staging, the style of how you present your work should also be consistent. Do not simply upload a digital file of the finished piece of work. Start to consider context, where that piece would live in the world. How can you light it to make it look really good and look like it's not just a digital file that you uploaded? Show the process, show the intended use, etc., etc. So what does that look like in reality? So again, here's my work. I did branding for a beer company. And they had these bespoke, unique glass design for their beer, and they wanted their logo on the cup. So what did I do? I photographed it in context in a bar with beer in it, with somebody sitting there to show it in situation, in context. It brings life to your work. All right, sometimes your photos don't work out the way you want. So this was a piece I did for a company. They're a networking company. And this is actually something I don't normally do, but they knew I worked with a lot of string and thread. And so they came to me and said, this is what we want. And I said, okay, I can do that. It's absolutely huge. And it's all nails and thread. And I had to ship it to the company for their lobby because it wasn't done in Toronto where I lived at the time. So I had to ask them to photograph the end result for me in situation, in context. This is the photograph I received. It's horrible. It doesn't show any of the detail. It's extremely low res. And they didn't put the grill on their venting system. So it just looks messy and awful and unprofessional. So can't really use it. But I really want to show that I did this piece for the lobby of a corporation and talk about how thread and string can be used for tech. And so what I did was I showed the process. And this is why documenting process is so important. It's very active. It's very intriguing. It shows hands-on. It shows how you did it. And you can get some really beautiful angles and really interesting shots. And so these photographs saved this project so that I could actually put it in my portfolio. So if you can't make it, you can fake it. So this is something I did for our GD. I did one of their conference proceedings. It was a digital file. It was never printed. But instead of just uploading the digital file, I wanted to show it in context. So I wanted to put it on an iPad, how it actually be read. I don't have an iPad at the time. I didn't own one. So I downloaded one of those templates that you can get off of the internet, and it will actually place your image in the template. So I don't know if anybody knows about those, but you can find those. I forget some of the names, but if you look up mockups, you can download all kinds of them. You want to use these extremely carefully. And the reason why you want to use them extremely carefully is that they're very generic. And if I can get it for free off the internet, everyone else can get it free off the internet. So everybody's web pages start to look very similar. So you want to use these at a minimum, but they are very professional looking. So here is another instance where I used a mock-up to show my portfolio to show my website. So this is my website, but I work very much with my hands. I work collage, I work with thread, I work very hands-on. And so I built my website through collage. And so I wanted to show that because you can't really tell by looking at the website that it was all hand built. So I showed the process to sort of prove that, hey, look, I've sort of mashed these two ways of thinking and making into a very technical digital piece. So this is sort of like a combination of still lifes and this template thingy. So you can also create mini still lifes. So if you've had something printed or if you've mocked something up, it's always great to photograph the actual object and not try to fake it in the computer. If you fake it in the computer, then your client knows, oh, this person has really good rendering skills, and that's not a bad thing. That can work in your favor as well. But if you've had something printed and you have mocked it up, it's also really good to show that you have printing prowess as well. So I did this stamp for Canada Post and I got the printed results. And so I fanned them out. I created these little still lifes and I photographed them, and it makes it look, it demonstrates the fact that this was actually a real job and it was printed. If there's something that needs to be interacted with, this was part of my master's that I did at York University in Toronto, where I hand printed small textbooks, primers for graphic designers on line, shape, and form, line, shape, and dot, sorry. And this was the booklet for line. And so each page had a hand printed demonstration, explanation of how line can be used for design. And then in the back, I had an envelope full of lines so that you could actually build these and work through the exercises using the pieces in the back. So I want to show that. If you have a book mock-up, it's always great to have hands. Always get your hands in there somehow to show the interactivity. And also you get these really beautiful, realistic shadows, which you can't get faked. You can't fake that. You can fake it, but it looks like it's been faked. Also, if there's something that is big, right? So here's a big poster that I'm holding up and I had a friend photograph it for me. The problem is that the whole point of this poster was the fact that it was sewn together. It's packaging that I chopped up. I sewed it all together. Again, feminist artwork. And so I had to show this detail to show that it was actually quilted paper. So you can actually get in there and show some of these interesting things that you're doing. Sometimes there's an interesting side story. So this graphic novel that I created was all photographs. It's a mishmash of photographs, collage, an illustration. But I wanted to show that these little dolls, I actually made these little dolls. I set them up on craft paper, lit them dramatically, and photographed them for the book itself. So you sort of want to talk them through that narrative and show all the different pieces and how it came together. Okay, so that is sort of my talk on your portfolio. So now I've got a few exercises and maybe we can, I don't know, if it's a webinar, you probably can't talk. So I will just let you think it through and then I will give you the answer. So we're going to think like a reviewer. So if you were a reviewer and a person was sitting in front of you and they had a portfolio that contained a good bio, a digital drawing, a typographic exploration, one pencil drawing, and one photo. Each piece is accompanied by a statement of intent, but there's no sketchbook and there is no process work accompanying any of the finished pieces. What do you think the reviewer would, what do you think the reviewers and thought would be? So a good bio is great, right? That's a checkpoint. A digital drawing, a typographic exploration, a pencil drawing, a photo. This shows that they have breadth. They're doing different things, but they've only got 4 pieces. So that's really limited. So I don't know if they just did those 4 pieces just for this portfolio and they've done other stuff on their own, but this seems really too little work for a portfolio, especially if there's no sketchbook, right? The sketchbook would show me way more in terms of how this student is thinking, how this person comes up with ideas, and it would show me a lot more than their 4 pieces would show me. Each of their pieces is accompanied by a statement of intent. So that would be really interesting to read through, because sometimes you can get a really good idea of how a person thinks through how they write about their work. But this might not get through a review. I would say that this one would probably be told to try again next year and build it up more, give it more substance. Okay, so here we have a portfolio that contains 12 pieces of work. So that's a good number. 15 pieces is a good amount of work in a portfolio. More than that, it's too much. You can do a lot with 15 pieces. 12 pieces is fine. It shows they show an engagement with diverse materials and techniques. So also it's showing that they have tried a lot of things. There's a little bit of passion there. A few of them have process work to support their creative methods. The bio is missing and there is no sketchbook. Most of the images do not have a statement of intent. So this is a tricky one because the 12 pieces are showing a good amount of work. But if most of the images don't have a statement of intent, I don't really know what they are. I don't know if they were for themselves. I don't know if all 12 pieces were done for school. So is there passion there? What's happening? What's going on there? There's no sketchbook. So again, I can't see the thinking process. But the really big one here is the bio is missing. So as a teacher, if you've been instructed to supply a bio and you haven't, it means you haven't read the instructions. It means you're not paying attention. So that's a bit of a red flag for me as a professor. So missing things that have been asked for, really try to check all those boxes. Okay, this one, there's a bio that talks about how they want to get into the design program specifically. The work in a portfolio is all beautifully rendered anime characters. Fantastic. Each rendering has a statement of intent, and the sketchbook shows a lot of exploration into the various character designs. So here we have a good, all the requirements are being checked off, except for diversity in work. So this shows me that this person is extremely talented in one area only. So my concern would be this person may not enjoy. They may not be a good fit, because if they're really interested in doing anime characters, then graphic design might not be for them, right? So I would need to talk to that individual. I would need to really read their bio to see if they really understood what graphic design was and knew what they were getting into. So you really want to show, if you really want to get into the design program, try to show some interest in design, try to show some breadth in your work, so that we see that you are trying different things. You understand that design is extremely broad. So this portfolio has a bio that indicates that they are interested in the illustration program, and they often looked at Marcos Chin's character drawing for inspiration. So right off the bat, they've done a little bit of research into the industry that they're interested in. They found somebody who they enjoy their work, and so now they're using that as an inspirational model. And Marcos Chin is fairly current. So that also shows that they are not just looking back in history, they're also looking at current people. The organization of the work in the portfolio flows nicely and is visually cohesive. The sketchbook shows exploration, revision, and refinement, but the work itself is pretty average, right? It's like meh work. This one would probably be a big old check mark from me. And the reason why is the work is average. they're coming to school to get the education. So what this one is trying to tell you is you don't need to be an amazing designer to get into the academic program that you want. You need to show all of the other things. You need to show that you're willing to explore different media and different ways of making, that you are understanding that there's thinking that needs to go into all these things, that you've done some research into the industry, showing that you're truly interested, you've got passion, but your work is kind of average. And that's why you need the education to become that superstar. Okay. So that is the end of my presentation. And now I would love to open it up to some questions if anybody has any.
This audience is pretty quiet. Saskia, I have one question. With the uptick in digital, it's still important to have work that is hand sketched or hand, offline.
Yeah, and that's where the sketchbook comes in really handy. Most design programs, you start off, you've got to take some drawing classes. Most schools require you to draw. So if you can show that you've done some sketching, it's just going to show that that's not going to be a stumbling block. That was a stumbling block for me. So yeah,
it's a Friday afternoon.
I've seen a lot of students who come in to a portfolio review and it's all digital work. And it's the sketchbook that sort of shows me, yes, this person totally handled this. This person understands that drawing and sketching is a big part of this, but it doesn't necessarily have to be in their portfolio, but it should be in a sketchbook.
Okay, that's good. Have another question. Can a portfolio be too diverse?
That's actually a great question. I always looked for a big range, but if a student really knew that they wanted illustration, then it lean towards illustration, right? If somebody wants design, it should lean towards design. But I mean, I have admitted students who had no design in their book and they wanted design, but because they had just this passion and their work was cohesive and it just showed that they could do it, they could handle it, and they had the willingness to try, right? So yeah, so I don't think too broad is bad,
as long as you stick within the number of pieces of ideally 15.
Yeah.
And I mean,
I've done both the in-person portfolio reviews and I've done just the totally virtual portfolio reviews where the student wasn't even in front of me, which I don't like, but that seems to be the way it's going now, where you're just looking at an online portfolio and you don't get to have that chance to talk with the student, which is why the writing is so much more important now.
Yes.
Where they've got way more than 15 and I just stop looking, right? I look at the first 15 and I stop because there's just way too many students to get through. So just know that if you're putting in more than 15, it probably won't be looked at anyways.
And put your best pieces in the front.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does doing theatrical work, I don't know if I said it right, but work for big companies like Nike or a Coke add value to the portfolio, or would it be better to stray away from, those known brands?
Can you just repeat that one for me?
Does doing theatrical work for big brands like Nike or Coke add value to a portfolio, or would it be better to stray away? We know some classes have those big, brief for a big company that you have to put together. So does that help or hinder the portfolio review?
That's one of your pieces. right? So if you're going for graphic design and you've put in a piece that you did theoretical campaign for Nike, absolutely put it in and talk about it. Talk about that, it's theoretical, that this was the goal, this was your concept, and this is how it fits within the Nike brand. That's fantastic. Absolutely.
Okay. Any recommendations for students for whom English is a second language for developing their bios or their written aspects?
That is a really great question, mainly because I've done a lot of research into how to support ELL students, but not all faculty have, right? So there can be a stigma, right? Oh, this person can't handle it because their English is poor, whereas I don't think that, and I look for ideas, right? I'm reading for ideas. I'm not reading for grammar and sentence structure, because that takes practice. But if you want to give yourself the best chance, have a tutor or a professional proofreader read over your work. It's just going to give you a better leg up to get into the school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great advice. Another question: are there any young designers or artists you think a student should be aware of?
There are so many. It's a great question, and I don't even know where to start in terms of answering that. You know what? Do a Google search for graphic design companies in your area. Do a Google search if it's graphic design or whatever other thing, illustrators, whatever. Avoid Instagram, avoid those, because that can be anybody. Whereas if you're searching for professional, it's going to give you people who might actually be known in the industry better than some Instagram person. Not that Instagram's bad. It's just that you want to be able to rattle off some names that might be more well known. And you also kind of want to make sure that the people who you are looking at are aligned to your values. I can't stress this enough. You don't want to say, oh, so-and-so and so-and-so. And then the person asks, oh, well, why do you like those people? And you can't bring it back to you.
Yeah.
So really you got to do the research, right? So I would start off with, sustainable or social justice designers in Toronto. I know right off the bat, Rally, Jay Wall in Toronto is fantastic. There's Clear Space Design. There's all kinds of places. Go to RGD website. Go to GDC website. There's all kinds of resources for you. AIGA website.
And Applied Arts.
Wow. All of these places are great resources for current professionals in the design world. Yep. But you got to do the work. You got to do the research.
Yeah. Any other questions? It's such a quiet audience. I don't have anything, and I can't think of anything. You've answered everything. Yeah.
Is there anybody who's trying to get into a very specific field or a specific area of design that might need help?
No. It's such a quiet audience this year. Last year was, so many.
Oh, good. There's a link in the chat that has a handout with most of the information that I gave you. So you can download that. And, if there any questions come up afterwards, you can always send me a note. Michael Bodden just asked, how can we know what to include in a portfolio for various fields? So it's similar, I think, So for example, Sheridan has a very specific pieces of work that they're looking for, right? So they will tell you exactly what they want to see, whereas other institutions will ask you to do it on your own. But like I said, breadth, you want to show you can draw, you want to show you can render in Illustrator, you want to show you can paint, you want to show you can, right? You want to just show that you're nimble and you're willing to try different things. Maybe you're going to show something from Photoshop, maybe, right? So different softwares, different materials by hand. But if you're looking for a specific field, you may want to include something from that specific field. So if you want environmental design, maybe look at some landscapes, maybe sketch some landscapes, maybe think about exterior spaces, maybe think about wayfinding signage and interior spaces. Just to show that you've got some interest in the field that you want to go into.
Great. Any other questions? Oh, we got one from Kevin. Can you please share the accompanying this discussion, which I'll just re-drop it into the chat so it's fresh. Okay, so I just dropped the document in the chat right now. What about for anyone who is looking to do more typography, including that in your portfolio as well?
Yeah, type is a really, really difficult thing to do. Lettering is great. So if you like to do calligraphy, if you like to do some tagging, graffiti, those sort of like lettering projects are fantastic. Typography is a really specialized field. So you can include it, but we won't scrutinize it. It will show that you're interested in it, but it's very in-depth. There's a lot of nitpicky, fussy things about typography, but you can definitely include it. But yeah, we won't look at it too closely.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions before we end the session? I think that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks again, Saskia, for coming out.
My pleasure.
I know I continue to learn more about Porfolio. Again, this